So my name is Daniel Becerra. I'm a assistant professor of ancient scripture here at BYU in the College of Religious Education. So the first thing I want to talk about is my experience with religious art in the church. I don't think my experience is perhaps uncommon. I've been a member my whole life. I'm in my late 30s now. And growing up, the church the art I encountered was fairly monolithic in the sense that it's fairly similar to the art that we see today in church buildings. And growing up, you don't really realize it, but I got to a certain age where I realized that I would see a picture of God and he was white. I'd see a picture of Jesus and he was white. Adam and Eve were white. Angels in heaven were white. Ancient modern day prophets and apostles were white. And you get to a point at which you kind of ask yourself, well, where am I in all of this, right? And it doesn't hit immediately, but over time I kind of realized the effect that this art had on me. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s, I think, where I was at a art show in Apex, North Carolina. It was a collection of art from LDS artists, and I saw a picture of an angel in heaven that had black skin. And it struck me so deeply. I'm not from African descent, but just the idea that there's a diversity of individuals in heaven, that people look different. It's not that I didn't know that cognitively, but that was the first time I'd experienced it visually in an LDS setting. And it just kind of struck me. It's akin, I imagine, to when people encounter the gospel and they realize what they had been missing. Like they found something that they didn't know they needed. It was something like that. So another experience I had in a similar vein was with a painting from Elspeth Young called Now Does Hear Me. And it's an African American woman kneeling down and praying. And these are just these were the first times in my 30s when I encountered art like that. The purpose of religious art is to depict our values and our history and to help us imagine who we are and who others are and our place in God's plan. And having these diverse pieces of art, we can see ourselves more in God's plan. We can see ourselves as His children. And this is why, in part, I think historically accurate and diverse depictions of art are important in the church. If you were to look in the church's handbook, the guidelines, it says something to the effect of that approved art for foyers or whatever church buildings. The purpose of those is to articulate our values and our history and to create a kind of a spiritual experience with individuals. And if we're going to accurately depict our history and accurately live our values, I think diverse art is necessary. If we're committed to the idea that all are alike unto God and all people are God's children, that He's no respecter of persons, I think it's important to honor the diverse representations of God, the diverse representations of the gospel plan as it's understood visually. And this is why diverse art is important. Also, I think historically accurate art as a historian, depicting Jesus how he was and his apostles how they were in the ancient world is important, because I think it forces us to see the image of God reflected in people that sometimes perhaps look different than us. Historically speaking, Jesus probably would have had olive skin, dark curly hair, maybe short to moderately long, maybe between 5'5" and 6 feet. So he would have looked like a modern Middle Eastern man. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there's value in seeking to see the image of God in people who are different from us. And I think if that was part of our culture, we might not have some of the problems that we have today in society and in the church. While at BYU, I've had the privilege to be on several committees, one of which is the Committee for Belonging in the College of Religious Education. And one of our first initiatives was to diversify the art in the Joseph Smith building, which is the building that we teach in. And one piece of art that's particularly meaningful for me is one by Michelle Franzoni Thorley called Opposition in All Things, and it's a depiction of Eve. So Michelle is a Mexican-American artist, and her culture is kind of reflected in her art. So one of the cool things about this picture is not only that Eve is depicted as having the same kind of ethnicity that I do, but also I've always seen it as kind of one of my goals at BYU here to make it a better place than it was when I was here as a student. It doesn't mean it was a bad place when I was here, but at some point I hope my kids will come here, and one of the blessings that they'll have that I didn't have is when they walk into the Joseph Smith building, they'll see a picture of Mother Eve, and she's going to look like them, right? They're going to see themselves in the story of God's family. They're going to see themselves in the gospel plan. They're going to see themselves as children of God. And that's a beautiful experience. And I think the more we can diversify art, the more we can create opportunities for people to have those kind of experiences.